everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Anna Palmer. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. We are thrilled to be having this pop-up conversation with Senator Shelley Capito. We are going to be talking with the West Virginia Republican about all things news of the day, no shortage of that, as well as a focus on federal funding for medical research and cures across diseases and conditions, including Alzheimer's, what happened in the funding package, what's going forward, NIH, and all that good stuff. A big thank you to United for Cures for partnering with us on this event. After our lawmaker conversation, I'll be joined by Russ Paulsen, COO of Us Against Alzheimer's and Executive Director of United for Cures for a fireside chat. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media at Punchbowl News, and we encourage you to share this conversation and get the word out about the important conversations we are going to have. And with that, I'd like to welcome Senator Shelley Capito to the stage.
Hello,
morning.
Anna.
Thank you so much.
Yes, great to be here.
All right. Well, we're going to start with some news of the day, as we always do.
Right.
And there's no shortage of it these days.
There never is.
To say the least. Let's start with funding. I want to talk about the conundrum we're in right now, right? Which is, how do you all find a deal going forward on DHS funding? The White House, Senate Democrats trying to find a way forward. Democrats put out their 10 kind of demands. Senator Katie Britt, who's your top negotiator, said, like, this is just a wish list for the press. Is there anything that you think, from your perspective, you would be willing to, come to an agreement on, whether it's banning masks, body cameras, requiring judicial warrants for arrests, other things that you think might make sense?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Thank you all for being here. And there is no shortage of news. I will say the big victory is that we got 11 of the 12 appropriations bills through. Very significant accomplishment. Although I was, as I was leaving home, West Virginia, as I left, I said, we're celebrating that we did 11 of the 12 5 months late, but great
it's Congress.
job.
Your Congress
great
is
job.
And
I saw the list come out last night.
Yep.
I was a little surprised because it is just, as Katie said, a wish list. It goes way much farther than what the original 3 or 4 items that they had put forward in the beginning. I think some of them have already been put into motion, and I believe some of them were in the bill that Katie negotiated that didn't make the cut. Those would be body cams, maybe some IG or some investigative parameters to go forward. You can see that Tom Homan has gone in there and pulled out a lot of significant numbers of officers out of Minneapolis to try to calm the situation.
Right.
Some of these things, like the mask situation, I think, I read where they want to, you have to wear a mask, you have to wear an ID, you have to have your ID number if you're an ICE officer. I mean, we see they're being doxxed, their families are being harassed. I mean, these are law enforcement officers that are enforcing our laws, and I don't believe that we should put them in a precarious situation like that. I think the Democrats know that's kind of a non-starter. It's a little ironic to me on the mask situation in that we just went through 2 years ago of the protesters all wearing the masks, is that the way to go? So I think they know that some of these are just way too far. I think we'll probably, if we can negotiate it, get down to probably 2 or 3 of the top that can be accepted on the president's agenda and move forward. If not, we're just going to have to continuing resolution for the rest of the year.
Yeah, so talk about that. I mean, because obviously it's a very short time between now and when that extension runs out. Do you support another short-term DHS extension, given how unlikely it is that the administration and Senate Democrats are going to be able to come not only to an agreement, but then legislative language and all the things, and passing it by next Friday?
Well, here's the real harm in this. I mean, the ICE portion of this has already been funded through the One Big Beautiful Bill. That's going to go forward no matter what. And you know this, Coast Guard, Secret Service, FEMA, a lot of the internal security issues are funded in this bill, and it puts the Coast Guard and others, FEMA and others, in a precarious situation with not having the certainty of their funding. So if they can't reach an agreement, and the Democrats are holding strong on their 10 list, they're basically holding funding from these very essential national security issues. and not going to change what happens. And if they don't pass a new bill, they're actually spending more for ICE than what they actually want.
So extension probably 50-50, less than 50-50?
You know, things happen quick. But I can't see if they're just putting this out Thursday, what was, last night, Wednesday night, I can't see that we can reach a conclusion. Maybe they'll extend it another 2 weeks. Yeah. I think initially the White House wanted 4 to 6 weeks to try to negotiate, but the Democrats wanted a tighter timeline.
Before we get to the topic of the day, which we're going to spend the bulk of our conversation on, I do want to ask you one thing, because all of this is in the lens of politics, right? I mean, when you're elected to office, we're looking at 2026. You are in cycle. You represent West Virginia, obviously a red state. But what advice do you have for your colleagues who are concerned about the political headwinds, are concerned about what the White House is doing, maybe not enough on affordability, or losing the kind of the argument when it comes to some of this immigration enforcement? Are Republicans prepared?
Yes, Republicans are prepared. We have, at least in the Senate, and I think in the House, I was with some House members last night. I do think the affordability issue is the key. I mean, it always is with the bulk of the voter. They know, the mom going to the grocery store knows what she spends at the grocery store every month or every week when she's trying to make ends meet with her family. She knows when something's not coming down or going up to 15, 20, and that's what really hurt President Biden. President Biden kept saying, no, the statistics say everything's fine. People know when it's not fine. They know when they're paying more for their mortgage or their power bill. So I think the affordability issue, and the hope is, of course, that when the Working Families Tax Cut bill comes into a full effect, people are filing their taxes. They're going to see more with no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, Social Security, and other small business tax advantages, that this economic kind of uncertainty is going to be much more certain for the voter. I think that's, people vote for you always heard it 100 times. They vote with their pocketbook. Yeah. And they want to know who they think is going to protect their pocketbook the most. In terms of immigration, I think there's no doubt that with nobody coming across the border, I was with the president the other day, and he says, nobody, that's the statistics. Even he doesn't believe nobody, like nobody's coming across the border. But you know how he does that little thing. And, but obviously not hundreds of thousands and millions coming across the border. I think that issue is still very solid for Republicans.
All right, let's get to the topic of the day: federal funding for medical research and cures across diseases and conditions, including Alzheimer's. You, like so many of us, myself included, have been touched by Alzheimer's in your own family. Can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe how that grounds how you see this issue?
Well, my real first exposure to something that is now called Alzheimer's was really my grandmother, my mother's mother. I was probably in middle school. She just began to really lose her memory, and it was a very sad time for my mother. Back then, it was called hardening of the arteries, and she was in a nursing home for 7 years, and just lost her. But I just thought, well, that's kind of the way it goes. Really think about it. Well, lo and behold, here comes my mother. Same thing. And she knew it. She would tell me, I'm losing my mind. Very sad time for her, because I'm sure she was looking in the rearview mirror at her own mother and realizing what had happened. And so she kind of went on the slow burn. Then all of a sudden, and my dad was her caretaker, then all of a sudden my dad went down. And he went down fast and hard and lost his short-term memory, wasn't making sense. So it was both of them at the same time. The only kind of silver lining is they didn't have to, he knew she was failing, but she never knew he was failing. So, in some ways that kind of made me feel better. And so I have a brother and a sister. We just tried to figure out the best way. I'm like, give me the book. I want the book that tells me when this happens, you do this, when that happens. There is no book. Right. There is no book because it's different. And so we did the best we could do, and made them comfortable, had them cared for. They could afford it. This is the issue. They could afford to have care, 24-hour care at the home. We had great caregivers. My sister was very active in going and checking. So anyway, it just is a passion for me. There's got to be a better way, both on not the person suffering, but for the family and the caregiver that has all these questions and doesn't know the right answers and the way to go, and who do you talk to? And so it was really tough.
Does that must inform, I mean, now you have the power of being on the Appropriations Committee, you're chair of the Labor HHS Appropriations.
Right.
How have you taken that experience into thinking about writing funding, thinking about the fact that research is needed?
Well, I think, and I see some folks in the audience who work on this every single day, and thank you for that. But I think that we are rapidly moving into amazing technologies and research, especially in everything, but I'm going to focus on Alzheimer's. We now have some medications that can help, with stopping the progression. We have some early detection tools that we've never had before. We've had a lot more awareness of how and when to try to detect and tools to use to do that. But at the same time, we have huge gaps here because who's going to do the detecting? Who's going to be the one that's going to ask the tough questions? And that's why we've tried to put it into the Welcome to Medicare, first screening for patients. These conversations that you have in a family when all of a sudden you're going to take the keys, or I'm taking the checkbook, or you're not going to be able to do this anymore. These are really, when they've been telling you what to do your whole life, it's hard. And I think a lot of our practitioners, they don't want to step into the middle of that either. And so what happens is it gets too far advanced and then you can't answer the question. So I think this early detection, training for our professionals, so that's where I've put my focus, and also on the research side. I mean, we've seen a lot on the amyloid development and some infusion treatments that you can do, other things that even 5 years ago you wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because you've been a longtime supporter of NIH. That has come under scrutiny with this administration. The numbers initially, we were talking backstage, pretty stark, right? 40% proposed budget cuts. Would have been devastating, I think, if you talked to a lot of the advocates here that work on these issues all the time. Walk us through how you got to a pretty different end result.
Well, it basically, I think we were all stunned when we saw that the president's budget came out with a 40% cut to NIH. And then when asked about it, the president says, I'm all for biomedical research. I want to move science as quickly as I can. And I'm like, well, there's a disconnect between what you're sending to us and what you're telling the American people you believe in. Susan Collins had a full committee appropriations hearing on biomedical research at the beginning when we first got the president's budget. Very impactful hearing. We had some practitioners. We had, as I recall, we had somebody who had actually been the beneficiary of some groundbreaking research at NIH, a patient. And she had her little girl there with her who was, I think, in second grade. Oh my gosh, that kid sat there the whole time. I'm like, I can't even sit here the whole time. I mean, did you see, if anybody was there, she was an amazing child. So I knew her mom was amazing too. But, and I think that framed it in terms for the committee, for the practitioners to really get their word out. And so I think, I don't want to say we didn't take it seriously because you have to take everything seriously. And we just worked and worked. So the initial thought that we had is if we could just stay even, if we could just stay even, this would be a victory. And there are some tangential, more complicated issues that we're running into this. Indirect costs, forward funding. These are more technical kinds of issues, but they really impact the funding at NIH. And I said, I'm just not going to stand here and let us stand still. Because you hear things about practitioners going or researchers going over to Europe. We're losing our brain power. Our younger researchers can't come in. I see what we're doing at the Neurological Institute at WVU with Dr. Razai, the young researcher that has to be there to learn, to be in the pathway, to be the success of the future. We can't allow this to happen. And so we were able to get, on the Senate side, $400 million more, in funding, which was, I thought, a major victory. But in the end, we got $415 million more in research for NIH. Now, do I think there should be changes in reform and efficiencies at NIH? I would say absolutely. It's a typical large government entity that you can't really move very well. A lot of people have been there a long time. And so you see Dr. Bhattacharya trying to make, he's an NIH researcher himself. And so trying to make some of the changes. But change is hard at those levels. But I'm just, and then all the upheaval of what's going to get canceled and what's going to not. I think a lot of that has settled down. But the funding portion we got because we just weren't going to let it happen.
Not to get too into the weeds, but we are Punchbowl News.
Yes.
How do you view the changes to kind of retain incremental versus that multi-year funding? I know that was one of the things that was under debate. Do you think it will impact NIH's ability to continue to drive innovation at all?
Well, I think that I learned in the process that I'm not always right on my initial diagnosis of what I think this does, because the FORA funding piece, to me, it sounded like, well, that actually might be a good idea for a researcher to actually get their money all up front and then be able to plan. Maybe that would accelerate the time that you could do it if you had all your money in front of you instead of taking 5 years. Maybe your project would only take 3. Well, I got schooled on that one by the practitioners, and back in the back there, Russ was telling me about it as well. Basically, what it were resulting in, and NIH moved in this direction this year, and in fewer and less broad research projects. And so while I believe that there's probably some research projects that we could eliminate at NIH, I'm not saying thousands and thousands. I mean, you can look at anything and make better decisions and better changes. I came to realize that this really would upend our ability to start new research projects, for the young researcher to get involved. So I kind of backed off of that issue.
You mentioned West Virginia, some of the kind of the pipeline of talent. I want to talk about that. How do these kind of, obviously, national policies impact what local communities in your state are experiencing? Talk about the research kind of movement within West Virginia and what you're seeing at some of maybe schools that you don't typically think of as the bastion of research in this country.
Well, I do think, and I've heard Dr. Bhattacharya talk about this, I do think this is an issue that a lot, and I wish I had the basic statistics, but it's way up, 80% of the research dollars are only going to a very few states, and a lot of it's to the same institutions all the time, and you all know exactly which ones they are. I mean, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Stanford, University of Alabama, Birmingham, and they've been concentrated in these areas. Well, we have a great wealth of talent where I live in Middle America, all across the nation, and so I've really been trying to bring and help West Virginia University, Marshall University. So if you look at something like addiction, our state has the highest amount of overdoses we have the highest amount of deaths from overdoses of any state per capita in any state in the union. It's not something we're proud of, but it's a fact. So if we're going to solve these problems, let's go where the problem is. And so at RNI, at WVU, and also at Marshall University, in conjunction with, through the IDEA program, which brings more dollars into some of the smaller research areas, it gives the availability of not just the availability of going where the crisis is and meeting your researchers there at the public institutions, but you're also able to bring in people who are close by that don't have travel problems. And the other thing is the Cancer Institute. I mean, we would love to get a Cancer Institute in our state. The statistics of proximity to a Cancer Institute on the types of treatment, the success in treating cancer and getting a successful treatment, if you're near one of these, they're very convincing. And so we're working on that. Rural America has the access is still a big problem.
For sure.
And so I've worked on that as well.
I want to talk about two things before we let you go. Our time is quickly wrapping up, but I want you mentioned we're getting these bills done 5 months late.
Right, well, they're done.
But they're done. September 30th is going to be around the corner. What is next when it comes to this issue? What do you need, or do you think your colleagues need in order to make sure that the funding stays the same, or maybe there might be a need for more increases?
Well, I think the good work that's done at NIH speaks for itself. And a lot of times it's an education process with our offices and with us as practitioners. I'm steeped into this deeply, but a lot of my members and other members are just not. It's not a focus of them. It's not their committee. It's not a passion. But everybody's touched by it. And this, I think, is something that we need to keep reinforcing. And so I think, I don't want to cede our medical research and our biomedical superiority in being able to unlock the answers to any other country. And to us, and to me, then that becomes a national security issue. So it really spans the globe in terms of where you're concerned. So we're just going to keep pounding the drum and making sure that NIH is moving forward with reforms. There are reforms that need to occur. The indirect cost is something that's very complicated but needs to be reformed, but in a sensible way that makes sense.
So I want to leave on that note, which is what you just kind of touched on, the idea that the U.S. has been a leader in medical research. How important is that? Do you think that that is something that this administration shares? Are you talking to them about the need for that, especially when it comes to maybe national security or just kind of U.S. superiority as we think about the role in the world?
Well, I mean, I think absolutely every American's proud of the fact that we're leading the way. I mean, where does everybody in the world come to when they have complicated problems or they have a need, a cancer? They're going to, MD Anderson, or they're going to the Mayo Clinic, or, maybe they're coming to, West Virginia to R&I for some Alzheimer's treatments. I mean, I'm talking globally. And so we need that superiority because, Americans expect that. They expect that. They expect us to be the best. And they're willing to put your tax dollars towards it and for it. And so I think we need to keep that front and center.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
All right.
Yep.
Sure. All right, now I'd like to welcome Russ Paulsen, Executive Director of United for Cures, to the stage for a fireside chat. Thank you, Russ. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's a great conversation to tee us up on our fireside chat. But first, let's start by kind of framing this discussion. Tell us what United for Cures is for anybody in the audience who doesn't know.
So for decades, a lot of patient advocacy organizations have been advocating for their patients. But we typically have done it individually. And we came together about a year ago and said, we think we might be stronger if we did this together. And when we faced the threat of a 40% cut that you talked about with Senator Capito, we really got together and said, okay, we have to get to work. And fortunately, I think the work paid off.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, not only did you not see the cut, but you got plussed up.
Yeah.
And in this environment, a difficult task. I think that kind of goes to my next question. We are obviously in a very partisan time, to say the least. But this is an issue where Republicans and Democrats have been able to come together. You've done some polling that found medical research support isn't partisan, it isn't red state, it isn't blue state. But tell us about what you found in that polling.
Yeah, what we found is that there aren't very many nonpartisan, bipartisan issues in this country. Sports, I think, in medical research.
There you go. But the 1-2 punch there.
That's right. That's right. And we actually combine them. I'll tell you about that later. But if you have a chronic disease, if you have a disease that's not understood, you don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, independent, you don't care if you voted in the last election and never voted before, you want that disease figured out as fast as possible. You want a treatment, you want a cure. Disease doesn't know politics. That's why we've had bipartisan support, Senator Capito, Senator Baldwin. It doesn't matter. Republicans, Democrats have always come together on this.
Well, and it's been interesting. I mean, we kind of started the conversation with the senator about this. This is medical research, Alzheimer's, cancer. I mean, these are things that all of us have been touched by, right? I mean, when you are going to the Hill or you are making the case, there is that commonality, right, of facing the fight together.
Yeah, I mean, it is rare to get through life without facing a chronic disease, either in yourself or in your family. And so when we bring together cancer and Alzheimer's and lung disease and heart disease in a United for Cures kind of effort, we're definitely connecting with every member on the Hill.
So Senator Capito and I talked a lot about the work she did in the 2026 Labor HHS appropriations bill, which included that $415 million increase for NIH. Talk about the impact, right? I mean, at the meta level, $415 million seems like a lot, but what will that have for patients in the broader medical research community?
Every dollar that's spent at NIH on research is a dollar spent toward figuring out a disease, ultimately toward treating it and curing it. And, you know, if you go back to like a 40% cut, right, that would have been absolutely devastating. It would have been 40% fewer shots on goal for cures. It would have strangled the pipeline of researchers. Like, if there's no money out there, and that has a generational effect. So not doing that and getting actually a plus up is an incredible victory that's going to lead to more shots on goal, more researchers, more cures, better for Americans.
So we often talk about what programs are getting more money, where cuts are taking place, but explain the difference. The Senator kind of got into it a little bit, but between incremental and multi-year grants, and why does it matter? Because I think if you're not in this every day, you might not.
No, it really is. It really is technical. I had to figure out how to talk about this, but it's kind of simple. So, one, it doesn't say the taxpayer is $1 to do multi-year or forward funding. It's the same. From a patient perspective, if you say you're going to have $1 million grant and you give out that $1 million in year one, that's $1 million off the table for something else. If you have $1 million grant and you give out a quarter of it, you get $250,000 in the first year. You have $750,000 left to pursue other avenues toward cures. Why would you not want to pursue those other avenues toward cures? And I guess I would also say, like, yeah, sure, the guy that's remodeling my bathroom would probably like to get paid all up front, but I'm not going to pay him until he finishes.
Putting the chips out across the board. I like
Exactly.
that. We often talk about what's happening with this administration, and there's been some skeptics, and elsewhere, not just in the Trump administration, that advocates are always just want more money for programs, right? What do you think is the right amount of funding for medical research? Are we at that point? Is more needed?
I don't know if I know what the right amount is. I think if NIH stops making progress, maybe that's where you start to say that's the right amount. But in my lifetime, I'll just take Alzheimer's. I work in Alzheimer's in most of my day, in addition to leading United for Cures. In my lifetime, Alzheimer's has gone from, Senator Capito talked about this, a thing that could only be diagnosed after you died if you looked at a brain. Then it became a thing that you could diagnose with a very expensive nuclear medicine imaging. Now it's a thing that you can diagnose with a blood test, and you can treat it. That's all just in my lifetime, since I was a kid. So we're making huge progress. The folks in cancer could talk about blood cancers that have been cured. As long as we're making progress, we should keep funding the progress. We don't want to stop the race while we're partway through. That makes no sense.
So you talked about how kind of the United for Cures came together, a bunch of different kind of advocates deciding to kind of pool the resources and the efforts. You've been very active on this issue to get more funding, to keep the funding for NIH over the past year. Talk about what worked. What were some of the lessons that you've learned that you're going to take going forward?
Yeah, so one thing we learned is that it really is a bipartisan issue, and we found patients across the country who cared, and we helped them raise their voice by making phone calls to members and letting them know that cures matter to them. But I'll tell you the fun story about the football, because I said sports and cures kind of nonpartisan issues. So we went down to the University of Alabama to a football game. And now, I don't know if you've ever been to a football game in Alabama, but it's kind of a big deal.
It's a little different than North Dakota. Not quite as big of a deal, but yes.
Yeah, I went to a Division III school. We didn't have football.
Exactly.
But they're there for the football, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not there to talk to cures. But we put up a little tent, a little United for Cures sign. We had these placards that people could fill out. And we also had a little recording studio. And we ran out of space for the placards. We thought that when people would fill out a placard, you know, I care about a cure for this because of so-and-so, we put them up on some walls. So we had these walls set up. We ran out of wall space. And then we started putting them up all over the tent. We started running out of tent space. And there was a line for the people going into the recording booth to talk about why cures matter. These are people in Alabama here for a football game, and they wanted to talk about cures.
So what do you do next? How do you use that in terms of kind of, you know, it's going to be September 30th before we know it, right? I mean, you want to take the victory and say, all right, the funding's there, but what are you kind of forward looking? What's your ask to the crowd here today?
Cures is a bipartisan issue. I think that we reminded everybody in Congress of that. I think Senator Capito doesn't need any reminding. But what she mentioned is that she does need help down dais. She needs help with her colleagues. And so we will continue to remind her colleagues who don't work in this issue every day just how bipartisan Cures is. We'll keep raising our voices. Maybe we'll go to another football game. I don't know. It was fun. And we'll find other ways to just keep reminding people. Once you explain it, people get on board.
All right, we are almost out of time, but before I let you go, we have the live stream going. We've got a lot of folks here, standing room only, to talk about this issue, clearly very interested. What's the one thing you hope people take away from this conversation?
That cures matter to everybody, that it's a bipartisan thing, that we are making progress and will continue to make progress. The only way we make progress, though, is with funding through the NIH. Almost every drug, almost every treatment that's come out in this country has come out because of NIH research, through colleges, universities, independent research institutions across the country. That funding is what gets us cures. We need to keep going.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Thank you
Great.
so much for your time today. A big thank you to Senator Capito for joining us, and for United for Cures for partnering with us. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.